Hey everyone, welcome to the Midlife Edit podcast. I'm your host, Jen Weinstein, and this is episode 4. Today I have a very special guest on. She is a fellow podcaster, a midlife mom, a mental health advocate, a nurse, and just an all around great human being. We talk about everything from being a mom in midlife to music and mental health to just vulnerable, very real things. So without further ado, please stick around and listen to my interview with the great Renae Lipsmeyer. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Midlife Edit podcast. I am super excited today. I have my very first guest. She is a fellow midlife mom. She's a podcaster, a nurse, a mental health advocate, and a fellow friend of the Dave Matthews Band. Welcome to the Midlife Edit podcast, Renae Lipsmeyer.
Hey guys. I'm super excited to be here. It's so weird to be on the other side of the microphone though, but I'm excited. I'm excited about your podcast. I think that there's not enough conversations about this unique time frame that we're in, and I don't even know that I like to call it midlife because I mean, I don't know. It sounds like it has a negative connotation behind it. And so we need to change that. And it's just a different season of life, a different chapter in our book. And so how can we like make that a positive thing? So I'm super excited about your podcast and everything that you're doing to get people talking about that.
Well, thanks so much again for being my very first guest.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Renae, tell me a little bit about yourself. I shared that you were, a mom and a nurse and everything, but tell me about you.
Yeah, so I live in Northwest Arkansas. I've been here for a little over 20 years. And the odd thing is if you would have ever told me growing up that I would live in Arkansas, I would have laughed and just been like, nah, that's not going to happen because I'm from East Texas. And like every state, there are good parts and bad parts and more beautiful parts than other parts of each state. And so all I knew was Southern Arkansas, which is not known for its beauty. It's not known for its beauty. And so Northwest Arkansas is in the Ozark Mountains. And so my grandparents retired here. And when I came up to visit with them, I just was like, wow, this is Arkansas. And so I fell in love with just the culture here. People love being outdoors. And Arkansas is a unique state in the fact that we don't have any professional sports. I mean, we're a smaller state, but not the smallest state, but we don't have professional sports. So everyone really rallies around college football, and we only have one major Division 1 football team, so everybody cheers for the same team, and that's kind of cool about our state. And so I love living here. But yeah, I have 4 kids. I have 3 biological children from my first marriage. I was married for 18 years to their father, and then we divorced after that, which again, it's another thing I like to talk about. Divorce is always one of those things that people want to have like a negative connotation with. And I'm here to say that divorce saved my life. Like, divorce was one of the most positive things that ever happened to me. And people don't want to hear that because you're supposed to try to make it work and blah, blah, blah. Believe me, we did. And I'm so thankful to be on this side of it. But I met my current husband, who is the love of my life. I always joke that it took me 38 years to find him, and he has been worth every second of that waiting. He's so sweet, and he married into just like a wild game that I don't think he was prepared for at all, because he only has one child. He was married for 6 years in his first marriage, and so we were just coming from very different backgrounds. And so, but it's really worked out and it's been beautiful. And so, I think knowing what I know now and like looking back, it is always true what they say, that hindsight's 2020, because boy, can you see it on the other side. But when I was 17, I didn't understand anything. But when I got married near 40, I knew a whole lot more. So I just knew what I was after versus picking a husband at 17, 18, 19. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But I grew up and I changed. And so, again, it's kind of like mental health and midlife crisis, how we like to use that, or divorce. Those are not negative things. Those are life events that can actually change your whole game for the better.
That's so funny because my story is very similar, except for my husband had the 4 and I have 1
Oh,
going
yeah.
into it. But we got married when I was 37, so same thing,
Yeah.
same
I mean, it's
situation.
wonderful.
We call it beautiful chaos.
It is. I mean, it is. It's so different, like co-parenting, because there's that whole thing that I've never done either. Like co-parenting, being a step parent, him being a step parent, merging two households, and like the rules that were established in households before. How do you sync that up when there's, maybe some different parenting styles? And so I have had to learn a lot in the 6 years that we've been married, and I like to think that it's just another thing that we're going to continue to get better at, right? Because
Absolutely.
that's how we get better at things, as we keep trying and being open to change. And it's been awesome. I love being a bonus mom. That's what I get to be called instead of a stepmom, because I always stepmom, to me, like, I just cannot get out of all, like, again, all the negative things that people think of
Cinderella.
sometimes. Cinderella,
Yeah.
right? And there was a movie, I think it was called Stepmoms. I don't know, but like always it's like these evil stepmoms. And so I never wanted to be the stepmom. So we came up with bonus mom and bonus dad. And really that's what we are, because, going through divorce, obviously our children struggled. We struggled to get through all of the chaos that is divorce. But I keep encouraging my children, and they know this now, but in the beginning I kept telling them, like, being from a divorced slash blended family really can be a beautiful thing if you put your mind through that, because you have so many more people loving on you. Like, you've got two households that adore you and that you spend time in. Then you've expanded all your grandparents and your aunts and your uncles. And so there's just more people to love on you. And how could that be a negative thing? That's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing. So, just teaching them that love looks different in every household. And so it's incredible how much we continue to learn, even in the middle of our life,
I
right?
know, right? So that's the mom side and the wife side.
Yeah,
You are a nurse.
I am. I went back to college, oddly enough, before I had my third kid. If truth being told, and I will tell you that, why not? When I went back to school, I knew in my head that my marriage was not going to be a forever thing, and that I needed to protect myself. And so I knew that not having an education that I could support myself with was going to be a hinder in everything later. And so I had the insight, thank God, to go back to school and become a nurse. It was something that I had always wanted to do, even when I was 18 and first went to college. Nursing was my first major. It's just, none of my family members are nurses, but I've always had like this deep desire to care for people. Like, I never really wanted to be in the workforce when I first graduated high school. My whole life was to be a mom, or to be a wife and a mother, and to be that caretaker role. And that was just who I was and how I felt at the time. And I never lost that, but I just didn't get the time because the babies came really soon, right? And so I dug into being a mom, and I got to stay at home for a long time. And that was so beautiful. But went back to nursing school when I was 29. And I like to encourage moms that may be listening to this and think that you're too old to go change your life or change your profession. You're never too old to just
Love
be like,
that.
I want to do something different. I'm still in that. I've been a nurse for 15 years, and now I'm like, well, what else do I want to do? I don't feel like you have to do one thing your entire life. I just don't believe in that. If it doesn't make you happy, if it doesn't bring you joy, kind of like, what is that lady's name that's like, get rid of it. If it doesn't bring you joy, just get out of it or
Yeah.
let it go.
Throw it away. Marie something or something. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, life is too short. And that's something that I remember every second of my day. And I think that that's something that nursing has taught me, because death was such a big part of my job. Just constantly remembering that life is short, and that it is way too short to be doing things that do not feed you joy, or that cause you pain, or that, we're just not made for that. And so if there's a way you can change what you're doing, change what you're doing. I don't think there's any shame in that at all. Just to say, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm going to do something else. Actually, I think that means you believe in yourself enough to say, yeah, I can do something different. I'm that strong, I'm that smart, whatever it is. And so here I am again at 45 going, what else do I want to do? And trying to figure that out. So maybe that's part of my midlife edit, right?
There you go. Yeah, I
It's an
love that.
edit. It's just an edit.
I mean, I was obviously, we've been Facebook friends for a while, and I was creeping on your social, and today you actually posted about being a photographer a few years ago, right? You tried your hand in that a little bit.
I
So
have. I have. I've just, I want to be happy. But also it's funny because one of my first majors was art. And so now that I look back on all of this creative stuff that I've kind of done, and I believe strongly that there is an art in compassion and loving on others. Not everyone can do that through crisis. And so I believe that there is an art inside of every profession, but nursing, there is an art. But, with the photography, I did that for a while just because, again, I love art. I love music. I'm totally passionate about those things. And so, I just got a wild hair and I said, why not? Why not do it? And so I literally started a legal business at the time my name was Renae Bird. And so it was Renae Bird Photography, and mostly specialized in small children, just because, again, that was the time frame that I was in with my children. So it's what I knew best, was how to talk to a 3-year-old, or how to talk, how to hold a newborn, or get them in certain positions for photographs. And so that was so fun, again, just meeting other people, meeting other moms, and still working, because I've always had, even though I always wanted to be a stay-at-home mom and that was always number one, I've always had this drive to do more and to do my own thing and to make money. Like, just to do all of those things. I don't think that you have to choose being a mom. I think you can do it both. You can be a great stay-at-home mom and do side businesses to make money. There's just no right or wrong when it comes to being a mom. You just have to do what's right for you. And my life is proof, and I think you could say the same, that it's not going to be the same your whole life. You are going to be 25 different people in your lifetime. And that's not like because you're multi personalities, it's because wisdom comes with age. It's not something you just are born with. And with wisdom, we can like grow and become new things and explore and not be afraid. And so I think growing older is a beautiful,
me too.
beautiful thing.
I
I
say it
know
all
so
the
much more
time.
now.
I say it all the time. We are so blessed to be able to grow older, aren't we?
Yes, because the alternative to that is to be dead. And I am not ready for that. I really do want to see my children thrive in their adulthood, which has been such a beautiful part of being a mom. And so funny that I would even say that, because, when we have our babies, we're like, oh, we don't want them to grow up. But they do. And like and you want them to, because that means that they're alive. And so I've tried to never be the mom that was like, of course I have my moments. I'm not saying that I haven't cried in the bathroom many times over like my kid graduating high school or going off to college or whatever. But like, also I try to make it a standing thought that they did it. You did it. We got through 18 years and they went off and they're happy. They're doing what they want to do. And there's got to be joy in that. There has to be joy in that. And also, just, I'm so humble that I was even given the opportunity to be a mom, because so many people don't get that opportunity. And I'm just so, so thankful for like every second of being a mom.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So we talked a little bit about that the other day off camera, about when our children grow up. And I think a lot of us get stuck in okay, well, I did the 18 years of being a mom. Now they're grown up and they're out of the house. Who am I now? Or what do I do now? Or how do I be that mom without being overbearing? Because listen, I can be super overbearing as a mom.
We all
Like, why
can.
are you spending your money on that? Why aren't you there? You know what I mean? Like, why are you sleeping right now? Well, because they're trying to figure out their life too. So what would
Exactly.
you say to somebody who maybe was a stay-at-home mom and had maybe a few side gigs, but for 18 years that was their life and their purpose? So what would you say to somebody now who has children who are out of the house and trying to find their way?
I think you still have to remember that you have purpose. Just because they're grown does not mean that they do not need you. I think about how many times, I think, oh, I need to ask my mom, just because she's in a different phase of life. So she like has the answers, right? And you still have purpose in your life. And now is the time. We don't want to hear this, and we almost feel selfish in doing this, because we've been told and we've been taught that in doing things for yourself is selfish. And that's not true. That's like keeping your pot full, keeping your heart full, investing in yourself, because you can't help others if you are not helped yourself, right? Like, you have to be whole in order to help other people. And so, that is such a tricky part though, because you do find yourself with time. And that's something you didn't expect was coming, is that when they go off, or, when you've invested 18 years in being a stay-at-home mom, or 5 years or whatever, you've just gotten yourself in a groove. Like, you do this every day. It's chaos, or it's quiet, or whatever the scenario is. And when it changes just like that, there's not only those questions of like, well, how do I be a mom to this kiddo? But also, what do I do with this time? But then also, every time I go in his room, I cry. And like, is that okay? Or, like, it's hard. And I don't think that there's words that I could give any mom to say that it's going to be easy. But you have to remember that this is what you wanted. When they were one, you wanted to see them grow up and be successful, and you prayed for that, and you invested in that. And now you are getting the fruit of your labor, right? Like, you are seeing what you wanted. And even if, because not everyone has children that that are maybe doing exactly what you want them to be doing at that age, just remembering to give grace, because boy, did I screw up a million times when I was 17 and 18 and 30 and 40 and 45, right? Like, learning our way is not necessarily a bad thing, but just giving them grace and giving them time, because there's a lot of expectations on an 18-year-old kid. Well, what are you going to do with your life? Well, are you going to get married? Well, what are you going to do if you don't do this? I mean, like, there's so many questions coming at them that maybe they don't know yet. I sure as hell didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life as soon as I graduated high school. So, there's some time there to still just be invested in their life, but in a very different way. It really kind of does transform. People don't want to hear this either, from more like parenting to friendship. And maybe friendship's not the right word, but that's almost kind of what it feels like, because we're very supportive. We're there. We're that friend for them that you give me a call at any time and I'm going to answer. But I'm in my parenting style, I did remember how I felt at that age, and I have chosen to give them some room to figure out those things by themselves, because I don't think anybody wants to be pushed and told what they have to do. And I think it's really important that each person find their way on their own, and really dive into what makes them happy. And someone telling them what makes them happy might not be what they need, or what is right, or I don't know. I mean, there's just so many different scenarios when it comes to parenting. And obviously all I know is what's worked for me and in my household. And I can guarantee you the house across the street from me does parenting and living a completely different way. And there's no right or wrong in that. But it is beautiful to hear other people's stories and techniques and things that they did or didn't do, because we can pull from each other. We don't have to say, oh, that whole idea, I'm going to take that whole idea. No, maybe just pulling a sentence from the whole paragraph is going to change everything in your house. And so just being very open to hearing how other people do things, not getting in a rut, because essentially we're asking for help, right? Like, when we're sad and we don't know what to do, we don't know what to do. We need help. And sometimes that's just listening to someone talk. So I think podcasts in general are a great way, but I'm just so flabbergasted that I'm this old and I have a podcast and I listen to podcasts, but I've never even thought about this particular topic and how really important it is for women. So I mean, again, I just can't tell you how awesome it is that you've picked this topic, because we don't talk about it, because really we don't want to talk about it, right? Because then, it's not fun to talk about, and you don't want to be the drag in the crowd. But like, moms do need to talk with other moms, and women need to talk to other women and just say, hey, I don't know if you can understand this at all, but like, from an outside perspective, does this sound crazy? I do that all of the time. Like, I have a friend who is never been married, does not have any children. She's my best friend, and who I go to for most of my advice, because she has such an outside, like, she doesn't have like that mom heart where sometimes we make decisions based on our feelings. And she's never been married, so she's fair in like what she sees. Like, it's very black and white for her. So I think talking to people in different walks of life can also be really helpful. So just keeping it open and talking to different people in all different ages. I mean, I love talking to I'm 45, so someone that's 65, 75, how much wisdom they can tell me and say, God, I remember being 40. There's some struggles in your face, but also it's probably what they would say. I've worked with the elderly a lot in my nursing career, and the 40s is the decade that they will always pinpoint as being the best decade of your life.
I love that.
Because
Love
you're
it, love it, love it.
still young. You're still young. Not like in everybody's thoughts, because my 14-year-old thinks I'm literally old, which is aggravating. If you talk to a 90-year-old, a 40-year-old is the prime of your life. You are grown up enough to where you know what you're wanting to do for the most part. And I laugh at that because I don't have a clue what I want to do. But like, you're in a better spot than you were at 25, just because, again, wisdom and knowledge and making lots of mistakes and learning from those mistakes. The 40s are a good chapter. So we have to remember that too, that even though it's incredibly hard, like they said it would be, and every decade will be, every year will be hard, every day will be hard, but how can we make it better? How can we do it in an easy way? And so again, a podcast is a really easy way. And I don't think that people recognize that enough, of how easy it is just to listen to it in the car and get some therapy for 45 minutes, right?
Well, speaking of podcasts, you started a podcast, and we are both very big Dave Matthews Band fans, but your take on your podcast is so unique because it's not necessarily about the band, because there's plenty of podcasts about the band and articles and everything else, but yours is about the fans of the band. And if you are a Dave Matthews fan, or just a fan of a band in general, and you know that great fan group, there are so many different unique perspectives on why you're listening to the music, how you got into the band. We talked a little bit about how mental health and music kind of go hand in hand. So what made you want to start this podcast?
You know, that is a crazy, crazy story. And I am going to do my best to make it as short as possible. But I think it's important that when I tell this story, that I want everyone to understand this, because it really does make sense with what I'm going to tell you we're doing in the future. And I know that we'll talk about what we're doing in the future. So again, I mentioned that I was married for 18 years, had 3 children, was a single woman for a while, and then got married again, became a joint or a combined household, a stepmom, all of the new roles that were beautiful. They were hard. And then we got married in 19. Then in 2020, COVID, and I'm a nurse. Okay. So life was a little bit whirlwind, just from, I mean, again, all beautiful, happy things except for COVID in my life, but just challenging, like having to learn how to do different things. Again, combining households can be tricky, but it can be beautiful. I think just a combination of never getting therapy and never working some things out in my head, because I didn't think I needed to, because I thought divorce was like the answer. And it was, but like there's more to it than just signing some papers, right? Because I had 18 years of the way I was treated or the way I was talked to, like all of that was who I was, right? And so, but there was a lot of who I was that was not good. But I didn't know that because I'd only ever been with one person, and that was a toxic relationship. But I just never thought about therapy, and no one ever said it. It was just like, yay, you got divorced, we've got out of that, let's change your life. Well, I did, and I became very happy. But I think just a combination of never getting help and then working through COVID, because, you know, we didn't get to work from home. I worked in a nursing home during COVID, which was just emotionally terrible, because they're like, it was awful.
I'm sure.
So I think it was a combination of just a lot going on in my head, and COVID was so hard on everybody. But as we got through it, 2022, I remember sitting in my floor in my bedroom, and I guess just like the right thought processes in my head all snapped at one time, and I sat on the floor and I was like, I don't care if I breathe again. Like, I don't care. I'm done. But thankfully, I told my husband, which was the best thing I could have done. And he was like, you're quitting your job. Because that was like the fastest thing he could do to get me out of COVID, and how terrible that was. It was beautiful. Don't let me get that mixed up. It was beautiful to be able to be there and to help. It was awful too. But it's like one of those things I'll never forget. It was awful.
I can't even imagine. And I know that those families of the people that you take care of still think about you, and yeah.
Yeah. again, it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot. And it made me so thankful for my family that I got to go home to them every day. And, anyways, I just got to that point. And so I told my husband, he pulled me from work, which again, I was willing. It's not like it was not a decision I did. I didn't want to, but I did. I knew it was necessary. And I was not in the nursing home then anymore. I had already left, but still working with the elderly. So it was still the same, right? Like, it was still not as vulnerable people because they weren't in a nursing home. They weren't in the end of their life. They were still highly functional adults. But because of their age, they were just more susceptible to COVID because of comorbidities, whether that was, diabetes or whatever. And so we just saw a lot of loss and had made relationships with them and with their family. And so there was just a lot of loss. And so my family said, after some thinking, that you got to come up with something that's for you, that makes you happy. That's like a creative outlet, because I wasn't doing photography anymore. I wasn't really doing anything, just kind of like working and being a mom. Like, that's all I did. And that was wonderful. That's all I needed until this point. And it just so happened that my best friend, who I talked about earlier, she had just started a podcast. I mean, it was just right in front of me. And she talked about something completely different because, there's a podcast about everything, but hers was about Bravo TV. She's totally into like the housewives and like all this stuff, And it's funny because
I've never watched a Housewives episode in my life, but I love that for her.
There's so much drama in Bravo TV, which is like the whole point. I get that. But there's like so many people that just eat that alive. And so she had a lot to talk about because there was an endless amount of drama that was happening. And so because that was right in front of me, I thought, oh, that is so cool that like you could just sit at your home and record your voice, talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about. And like, who cares if anyone listens to it? It's fun for you, right? And like when you're 90 and you listen back to it, it'll be so funny that you did that, right? So that's how I would go into this. I'm just like, oh, I'm going to start a podcast because Leah did it. But what am I going to talk about? I don't know I don't want to talk about nursing. That's boring. I don't necessarily have any advice as far as being a mom goes, other than I'm a mom and I know how it works in my house, but like I didn't feel like I had any advice to give. So what can I talk about that makes me happy? And the first thing that came to my head was the Dave Matthews Band, but like that's such a broad topic in general. And if you're listening to this and you don't know much about them, they started in 1991 and they're still traveling and performing. And so they've been a band for a very long time. So they have a lot of history. And so I knew that was just so much. So I wanted to kind of like, okay, well, but what about it? Yeah, it's the music that got me there, but like, what have I received from that music? And what I had received from that was so many amazing people that I had met from the community, from just that were fans of the Dave Matthews Band. And a lot of that came in, once I left Arkansas to see the Dave Matthews Band and started kind of noticing the same people were at the shows, and then finding the online communities through Facebook or Instagram or whatever that was, and just connecting with all these people who made me feel less crazy because I am really into the Dave Matthews Band. And everyone else in my life thinks that that's kind of a negative flaw for Renae, right? Like, she's that crazy girl that loves the Dave Matthews Band. Even when I was nursing full time, I would be known as the nurse that loved the Dave Matthews Band. I didn't hate that, but I was just like, so when I thought about that, I was like, okay, well, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the fans of the Dave Matthews Band. And so I just started it. I asked a few people that I knew to like come on. And again, this podcast started first episode, which is the teaser episode. I had just like a tiny little voice recorder, and me and a girlfriend that also liked the Dave Matthews Band sat in a restaurant and just recorded like 10 minutes worth of us just talking about music. And so while I didn't know what I was doing, there was some fun in that, like me figuring it out. And I didn't know how to do a podcast. I didn't watch a bunch of YouTube videos or even really spend a lot of time trying to figure that out. And it's funny because I can see that reflect in my work now compared or back then compared to now. But also I think, I don't know. I did not know what was going to happen. And that's what I love so much about my podcast is it started as something for me that I needed to help save my life. As a tool to help save my life. And what ended up happening was I am producing a show where almost everyone that comes on the show talks about how the music saved their lives. So it's just so good that
So
like
good. I'm like tearing up as I'm thinking about all of it. It's so good.
it's just so wild. And I know that you could really be talking about any band, and there are fans that will connect, and there are football teams that have fans that connect and share life together. And when you share life together, that means talking about, you know, the midlife crises and the cancer diagnoses and the loss of the spouse and how do you go on, or the loss of a child and how can you possibly move on. Those are the things we talk about on my podcast, with the Dave Matthews Band being in the background because that's what brought us all together, but how the music has been used as a tool to get them through whatever it is in their life. And there's been addiction, there's just been so much, even as far as bullying. I mean, there's no topic that is too small. If music has impacted your heart and changed it for the positive, we want to talk about that. And that's really what we're talking about, is mental health, how music can be a tool in that, and just making a really loud noise about it, because I don't think that we give music enough credit.
That's so awesome, and I am so proud to be your friend because your podcast I mean, it's awesome. It's great, and it's introduced me to people maybe just while I'm driving that then I meet at a show or in Mexico or something, and I'm like, "Oh, you were on Renae's podcast," and then we just start chatting. It's such an amazing community, and what you're doing there is really great. And you have recently announced that you're
Yeah.
making a documentary about mental health and music. And
That's
that's
what
so
moms
exciting.
do, right? Moms, when we're looking for something else to do, of course, the natural next step is to make a documentary.
So tell me about it. You met somebody in Mexico. You were in
I
Mexico for Dave
did.
and Tim.
I did. So this was something that I knew I had knew for a little bit. And if you've listened to my podcast, you might have heard me say back a year or a little bit more ago that I was going to write a book with all of these stories. Which is funny because I don't read books. I want to be a reader so bad, and I buy books all the time, and I can't get behind it. It's the ADHD in me. Like, I just can't sit for very long. I'm not. And so I was like, why would you write a book that like you would not even read? So then the next thing on was like, I love documentaries. I love them. I watch them all the time about anything. I don't care. I just like to hear the stories, like origin stories of like how things happen, like real stories. I don't really spend a lot of time in fake stories. I just like real stuff. And so I got to thinking, after hearing story after story after story, the stories that I were capturing, and I didn't even know that I was going to, because that's another thing about my show, is I never know what my guests are going to say. We don't do a pre-interview. I mean, like, we set up the time, but I never know what they're going to say. So there have been stories that I wasn't prepared for and didn't even know what to say, but thankfully God has just given me the words or something to get through it. And these have been some of my favorite episodes, because it is just people that have endured more than just about anybody thinks they could, as a person. And to hear all of these stories, I knew that there had to be a bigger plan than a podcast, because you're probably not going to listen to my podcast unless you're a fan of the Dave Matthews Band, just because there's a million podcasts and this is a very specific topic to a specific group of people. And so how can I make this exposure bigger? So then I started thinking documentary and really focusing on mental health and music. But again, I am a mom, a wife, a nurse, a podcaster that started not knowing anything. So how am I going to do a documentary? Well, I think it worked because I kept telling people that that's what I was going to do. I just kept putting it out into the universe. I was like, well, I don't know how it's going to happen. And I would say it just like that. I don't know how it's going to happen, but this is what I want to do with this information that I have captured. I'm not ready yet. I want to get some more stories so that we have a lot of documentation, but that's what I want to do. And so, 2025, I met a guy through some friends, some other Dave friends, and he just happened to be a producer for documentaries, and he owns his own company. He produces his own films. And so he was like, let's set up a time to talk about your podcast, because he had not listened to my podcast, and I took no offense to that. Like, you've got to find it. You've to find it. And then if you still don't like it, cool. Like, it doesn't hurt my feelings. But he's like, just tell me the basics of your podcast. And I told him that, I kind of was like, I started because I had my first, what I would call my first mental health crisis. It was born out of me not caring if I lived another day, which is so incredibly terrible to say. And I hate saying it, but I have to because it's part of my story. But I hate saying it because I do think, as a mom, what if my daughter listens to this podcast? How am I
She's
going
going
to
to be
feel about
proud
that?
of you. She's going to be so proud of you that you spoke up, because unfortunately, there are so many people who don't speak up and we lose them.
True.
So
I
she's
hope
going to
that.
be so proud of you for speaking up and taking care of you.
Yeah.
Because as moms, but especially as older moms, we've got to take care of ourselves because we spent so much time taking care of these other little people in our life.
It's true. Thank you. Yes, no, that's so true. But it's like those thoughts that go through your head of like, I shouldn't talk about this because it's going to negatively reflect on my children or on my husband, that he's not loving enough. And it was none of those things. It was that I didn't take care of me. I went through 18 years and never got help. And it's so important just to talk about it. But often we find ourselves not wanting to talk about it because if we don't talk about it, it's not existing, right? Like it wasn't happening, or it's over. And that's not true because the brain is a booger of a deal, and we can hold on to information and get upset about it and not even realize that that's what's making us upset, or the way that we respond to things is because of the way we handled a situation for 18 years with someone else, and so there's so much that has to be rediscovered about you. And therapy in any form is helpful. And so music has been such a tool. For me, it just happened to be my favorite band, the Dave Matthews Band. I like to believe, and I think other fans of the Dave Matthews Band like to believe, that the band would, I think any band would, but specifically the Dave Matthews Band, would find these just full of love. And I hope that it would make them see how big of an influence music has on this world and how important it is to so many people. So yeah, there's going to be a documentary. We're working on that. I'm still recording the podcast, just as I am always doing. I'd like to say my goal right now, and this is just me saying things out loud, I have no idea what's really going to happen. I haven't known from the moment I picked up my first Amazon microphone to do a podcast. I haven't known what I was doing or what was going to happen. And I keep saying I'm not going to change that because it's working out pretty good for me. So I'm not going to just like start doing things different now. I just believe if it's meant to happen, it will happen. And I think that I've just found something that people need to hear, and that it's going to happen. And so my time frame is 2 years, and I'm excited. I'm just so excited to share all of this with everyone. And I think that it's just going to come at the right time, because again, they've been performing for over 30 years. Who knows how much time we have left? And so I'm hoping, this sounds wrong, that I'm hoping that my documentary can like coincide with their retirement, because I do not want that to happen in the next
No,
2
don't speak
years.
that into
No,
existence.
no, 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 no. I don't, but like, how beautiful for it to happen in the same decade, because it is an underlying love letter to the Dave Matthews Band. And so I want them to at least know that it happened. I mean, it doesn't matter if they ever know, because that's not what I'm doing this for. But I would love for them to know, because if I had impacted that many lives, or had a part of impacting that many lives, I would love to know about it. I'd love to know. So
Oh, that's so awesome. It's been a lot, right? Let's do some fun rapid fire questions here before we wrap up.
Let's see if I can do it. I don't know.
All right.
Am I on my toes thinker? I don't know.
Okay, well, if you could have a theme song for this season of your life, what would it be?
Oh my God. Break Free is always like my go-to. Like, I love it.
Love it. Okay, so which version though? Do you like the recorded version or do you like the Boston version? Because that Boston version, man, when they recorded that at Fenway Park, I think that's my favorite version.
I love that version. For those of you that this is going to sound like a dumb answer, I don't like the newest version that they currently sing. I like the older, like when it was a song that no one knew about. Like, I like that version, but I love any way they play it, and I'll take it anyway.
Awesome. All right, coffee or tea?
Coffee. And I'm really saying neither, but coffee.
Yeah. So what gets you through the day? If you're
Dr. Pepper.
Okay.
And I hate that that's my go-to, but I mean, I could be making worse decisions in my life than Dr. Pepper, so I feel good about myself.
All right, so we know that you love the Dave Matthews Band, but if you had a dream concert lineup 5 bands, who would it be?
See, these are like hard questions. Rapid fire is going to be tough. Dead or alive? I'd love to see Stevie Ray Vaughan. If I could just like name any dream circumstances, of course, Dave Matthews Band. Stevie Ray Vaughan, never got to see him live, of course, just because of his untimely death. I loved Steely Dan. They're one of my favorite bands. I got to see them once and it was mind changing. So I'm going to throw them back in there. I think that seeing Whitney Houston would have been awesome just because she's going to be known forever and ever. And she was such a big part of my youth. Like, we believe the children are the future. That song is forever in my head, every single word. I know it. Like, it was such a big part of me growing up. And so she would have been really awesome to see. Is that 5?
That's 4. 5. One more. Throw one more in there.
I have to say maybe the Grateful Dead, like the original, the OG, just because I did never have the opportunity and I've only heard good things. So
yeah, awesome. All right. And then you said you're not a big reader, but one book or podcast that you think everyone should check out.
Well, definitely the Midlife Edit, but you're already here. So yay. Book. That definitely don't have any recommendations on that. Podcast that I've found recently. I mean, if you like the Dave Matthews Band, there are a lot of Dave Matthews Band podcasts out there. And that's what I listen to. I like it because they're all so very different. The pod that Jane likes, very Love statistical. If you like statistics, that's your group right there. They're awesome. The Corner of Gray Streets, 2 guys, they bring on guests and talk about different things that all has to do with the Dave Matthews Band. And then check out the Space Between podcasts. You already know what I do. Outside of that, you want me to shock you?
Okay, we're ready.
God, I just thought about this when I pulled up my podcast list. Like, what podcasts do I follow? Well, one of these is life-changing, and I guess this is not the shocking one. There is a, hold on, let me find it. I want to get the name right, because it's called How Come, and it's spelled C-U-M, not C-O-M-E, and it's the most hilarious, like, most raunchy, but hysterical podcast about a woman that literally just never had an orgasm like for a while, like just and talked about it like, I'm frustrated that I've never had one, like I want to. And then she just kind of talked her way, like she would have guests on that would give different recommendations on how she could or whatever, and then she finally did, and then she came back and talked about it. And while that sounds crazy, sometimes you need crazy, and that's just like when I need a different level just to be like, yeah, I'm about to go off, that I just turned it to something funny that's just so random.
That's great though. Well, Renae, if somebody's looking for you, where can they find you on social media? Not at your house, don't give us your address.
Yeah.
Where can they find you?
Okay, so Facebook, there is officially a page. It's the Space Between podcasts, so very easy to remember. Then there is a group, which there was a group before there was a page, because we've grown, right? The podcast has grown. And so, but the group is pretty much, it reflects all the different things, but it's also under the Space Between podcast. If you want to know what the Space Between podcast is doing, I would say Facebook is your best bet. For events and things, it's just more user-friendly than Instagram, but I am on Instagram and I do post a lot on it. It's just the Space Between _, which is the line that lays down all the way on the ground, and then POD, so the Space Between _ POD, and then TikTok, because I have children that apparently I embarrass and I can't stop. So I have TikTok. It's under the Space Between podcast. I don't only talk about the Space Between podcast on my TikTok though. I do random things with my daughter. Yeah, like mom's hat, like whatever I'm thinking that day, or whatever my daughter has like been like, don't ever do that again, then that's what I'm doing. So TikTok is just fun stuff. So definitely check me out on any of those platforms. And then of course the podcast can be found on any of the podcasts, whether it's Spotify, Apple, whatever it is. You can Google it and you can find it. So anyone can listen to it for free. And if you're excited about the documentary and you want to hear what's more to come, definitely check me out on any of those socials.
Awesome. Well, I will link everything in the show notes. Renae, thank you so much for being my very first guest. Thank you for being vulnerable and just talking about your story, because we all need to hear. We need to talk about it more. We need places like this where we can go and we can be vulnerable. So I really appreciate you, and I can't wait to see what's next.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Wow, what an amazing interview we had today, right? So happy that Renae decided to be my first guest on the podcast. She is somebody so great to follow and listen to, and I'm just so thankful for her vulnerability and talking about all of the things in her life that she has overcome. Make sure you go follow the Space Between podcast. It's a really good podcast. Even if you're not a fan of the Dave Matthews Band, it's just really awesome to listen to the stories and hear about all of the struggles that people have overcome. So I'll link that in the show notes along with her socials, and stay tuned for more guests. I have some really great people lined up to interview on this podcast, and if you'd like to be one of them, please shoot me a message. info@thejenweinstein.com is my email address. I will link that in the show notes as well. And until next time, this is the Midlife Edit. Let's make it a damn good chapter.